So it's kind of late at night and it's hot as balls, so I can't sleep. But I thought it was a good idea for me to finally make this video. So you can probably, I think this is probably going to be a really long video, so I have like this really good glass of water. So let me start off with this. Okay, anyway, this is going to be about the quote-unquote the canonicity of Super. I've been talking about this video for a long time, so I finally want to get down to recording. And I don't know, where should I start? I guess obviously, as you can tell, I've pretty much been very disappointed with Super in general. Even though there are things I like about Super, obviously, like Hit, Super Saiyan God looks cool, Beerus is awesome. I've said these things before. But I want to talk about the canonicity of Super, because many people are under the impression that just because something is written by the original author and it's under the Dragon Ball name, that automatically makes it canon. And that's not always the case. And I have, I kind of had to go out of my way to actually like bring up like other examples of similar things happening in different series, but the opposite is considered true. So I don't want to say, so this video isn't to like say that Super isn't canon. That's not the point of the video. The point of the video is to show that on one hand, yes, one can consider Super canon, but on the other, there's an argument to make to show that Super can be considered non-canon. It's not so much as an ultimatum for me, something is canon or it isn't. And especially in the case of Super, I think it's even more like murky and gray. So I guess I can just get into it real straight up. The first thing I want to talk about is just like what canonicity is to Dragon Ball. Like canonicity, like in terms of Dragon Ball, we always say like the manga is canon, right? Like that's the canon story. And the reason we say that is because and it's for a couple of reasons, so I'll state those. One is because that it was what Toriyama created. Toriyama is the creator of Dragon Ball, right? Now, what he created was the Dragon Ball manga. That's what he created. That was the source. That's canon. The anime, or the anime adaptations, were exactly that. They were adaptations of the manga. They came after it because they were based on the manga. So all the stuff that we say, like Paikuhan or Garlic Jr., all that stuff we refer to as filler, right? Because that didn't happen in the manga. That's not part of the original story. And so when we say canon, we think about like true story. Canon, I mean, canon is one word, but what the reason we care about like what's canon is because we care about like what's true, like what's the actual true, most relevant story, right? Like that's what canonicity means, or that's what at least what fans care about when we talk about canon, right? So that's what specifically it is to Dragon Ball. So by that nature, people are under the impression that anything that Toriyama writes, because he is the creator, is automatically considered canon. But that's not always the case, because in Super, as we know, if we know what Toriyama's role is in Super, all we know is that he provides an original outline. So Super, unlike Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, there's no original source. There is no original portion for, there's no original portion, there's no original product for Super. You have an anime and you have a manga. Yes, the anime came out, I believe the anime did come out first, right? And that was because like it was recapping Dragon Ball, or it was recapping Battle of Gods and all that, right? It was Battle of Gods and Revival of F, and that came out first, and then the manga came after it. But it's not so much that the manga came after, it's not that they're not based off of an original source, or an original product, I should say. There is an original source, which is Toriyama's plotline. But the reason we can't really say, a plot outline or guidelines for his plot, that's not a product. that those are just guidelines. Those are unfinished things. Those are just outlines. Those are just rough drafts, right? So the super anime and the super manga are pretty much original products of their own that share similarities, but also have their differences. There's not, unlike the Dragon Ball Z and the Dragon Ball anime, which were based off of the manga, Super doesn't have that. So when we talk about Super's canonicity, yes, it takes characters from, like I said, Dragon Ball Z, you can throw GT in there, I guess. But there are always, there's no first product for Super. And it's not so much that there needs to be one, because if I were to bring up like another series, look at Kenshin. Kenshin is coming out with the Hokkaido arc, right? The difference is that the Hokkaido arc, it's not a new series, it's a new arc, right? It's just a new arc. It's just a new arc, and you can say the same thing with Battle of Gods and Revival of F, because those were just separate movies. You can consider those arcs. But Super is literally a collection of arcs. It's like its own series. The Hokkaido arc for Kenshin is just an arc. So it's different, and not only that, unlike Toriyama, who's just putting out guidelines, what's his name, Watsuki, who is the creator of Kenshin, is actually drawing a manga and writing it and penning it and, doing all that stuff by himself. So it's by his own hand. And that's another reason like why you can consider Super to be non-canon, because just because Toriyama puts out plot guidelines, that's all it is. It's guidelines. It's Toyotaro for the manga and Toei with multiple writers for the anime who flesh out the details and who flesh out how the story flows, right? They have a general guideline, but everything else, the animation, the dialogue, all that stuff is fleshed out by, those two respective parties, Toyotaro and the Toei writers. Or animators, if you want to include Tadayoshi Yamamuro as the director for movie 15, Revival of F. So in that respect, you can consider Super to be, that's a reason why you can consider Super to be non-canon, because all the details are fleshed out by people other than Toriyama. Now, granted, Toriyama has given them his permission to do that, right? Obviously, or well, maybe not permission isn't the right word, but so. I don't know if blessing is the right word either, but it's more like, okay, here's the guideline, go ahead and animate this, or go ahead and draw manga for this. In the case of Toyotaro, he says that he works closely with Toriyama, like he sends his chapters to Toriyama so that he can like look over them, right? And then he sends them back. So how diligently Toriyama does that, how scrutinizing of an eye Toriyama has when he does that for Toyotaro, we don't know, and we'll probably never know. But what we do know is that that does happen. Let me mute this. Sorry. What we do know is that actually does happen because Toyotaro has said that happens. He said that he does that with every manga chapter that he submits to V-Jump. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not weekly. Yeah, it's V-Jump, right? The magazine where Super runs them. But I want to talk about other series real quick. So I want to bring up Lupin the Third. Lupin the Third is a very old. If you guys don't know what Lupin the Third is, it's an anime manga, right? It's created by this dude named Monkey Punch, and I believe the original manga has been done for like 30-something years, right? So the anime that came after it was obviously based on the original comic, but it was very loosely based off of it because not all the stories from the manga were perfectly adapted into the anime, right? And so what's interesting about this is now that even though Monkey Punch is seen as the creator of the manga, and you talk to any Lupin the Third fan about this, what is seen as canon, or what is seen as the original, the true story, I'm trying to use true as much as I can, but what is seen as the true story of Lupin the Third is actually the anime seasons, right? So let me say that again. Monkey Punch is the creator of Lupin the Third, right? He created a manga, and that's what Lupin the Third, like, that's where it sprang from. You know, Lupin and Jigen and Fujiko and Goemon and Zenigata, like all those characters, right? All started from the manga. But what is seen as the true story is the anime nowadays. And it's seen like that for a number of reasons. One of the things that lends itself to canonicity of a product, right, is popularity. And I'm going to talk about that a little later, because I just want to stick to Lupin the Third, like, for right now. But popularity in itself can supersede authorial intent, like what a writer writes. And it's happened and I can give you a very popular example: Star Wars and George Lucas. George Lucas is obviously the creator of Star Wars, right? But now we have new Star Wars. We have new Star Wars. What's the word? Content being created with that has nothing to do with George Lucas, and that's being seen as canon to the Star Wars universe. Episode 7, Rogue One, The Last Jedi, which the trailer dropped, last night, or I should say a day ago. You know, all those things put together, those are what we see as canon products, which were not created by the original creator, right? And so Lupin the Third is kind of like that, right? Lupin the Third is kind of like that, in that Monkey Punch created that, but he has very little to do with all the new seasons. The new 2015 season that started with Lupin the Third, with the Blue Jacket in Italy, the one where he's in Italy, Monkey Punch literally, I don't even know if he had any role in that, and yet that is seen as canon to the original story of Lupin the Third. He has no say. He did. As far as my knowledge, he has no say in it. He didn't, or it's not like the company was like, oh, like, you can't tell us what to do or anything. But they didn't approach him for anything. They just said, like, oh, let's make a new Lupin the Third anime series, and this is canon to that. So the point is, like, Dragon Ball Super can kind of be seen like that, right? I mean, yes, the original plot guideline is created by Toriyama, obviously, but because it is Toyotaro and Toei, the Toei writers, who flesh out the details on their own, right? If I were to use the Lupin the Third, which I just stated as an example, you can make the case that Super is canon because of that, right? Using that same example. The other thing, though, is that obviously Monkey Punch was the creator of the manga, right? Monkey Punch was the creator of the manga. So when we talk about, like, what is, so there's always going to be that discourse, like, this was the true story, but this is what is, like, this is the universe that is being expanded. It's the most popular, and it's what is most memorable and recognizable with Lupin the Third. Not only the character, but the series as a whole. It's the anime series. It's him, like, wearing different jackets, and the tone of the series is different. The characterization, or not the characterization, I should say, but the humor and the atmosphere of it is a lot more, like, it's a lot more lighthearted in the anime. The continuity is, I would say, is, like, probably a little more fucked up, though. Continuity in Lupin the Third, like, you can get away with. But but the point is, like, with relation to Super, you have different ways on how events play out, and because you have different ways, so I'll give you an example, like the Zamasu arc. Zamasu makes clones of himself, right? Merge Zamasu, whereas in the fucking anime, he gets cut in half. Right, and then, you know, we have that trash-ass plot point of him, like, enveloping the sky and breaking space-time, right? Like, that whole fucking retarded bullshit, right? And obviously it's retarded bullshit in the manga, too, because he just goes into clones, and that's never explained. So that's bullshit, too, right? It's just bullshit, obviously. I mean, Zamasu just sucks, right? And you know, obviously, like, I can't get enough of saying that, obviously. But the point is, like, you have different ways on how a situation played out, right? There is no one original way on how that played out, right? There's no original source on what happened to Zamasu, because Super, unlike Dragon Ball or all these other things, there wasn't an original Super product. There were two. There was the anime and there was the manga, and they had different variations, right? Yeah, they had similarities. The general story, in very basic layman terms, is the same between both the anime and the manga. You have Golden Frieza, you have Hit versus Universe 6, versus Universe 6, like Hit, Cobb, all of them. You have Zamasu, now you have the Universe Survival, right? You have the progression of arcs. But the way in which events play out is very much different. And they conflict with one another because one thing happens in one series, right? And it doesn't happen in the other. And it always conflicts. And in my opinion, because that happens, you cannot say that one is more, not only can you say that one is more canon than the other, right? But you can make the argument that because Toriyama himself did not write that, right? And like I was saying with Lupin the Third and Monkey Punch, because obviously because there are differences, you know, like which is, you know, what you can, using common sense, you can tell like what Toriyama did or didn't write. There's always the off chance that Toriyama came back later and was just like, oh, actually, you know what, like put this in here, and you know, something in here that wasn't in my original guideline. We'll never know that, right? But it makes it very murky and very clouded. And in my opinion, because there are those differences, because you don't know like what that original, how that original story went, you can make the argument that Super is non-canon because of that. The events are different, there's no original source, and you have an author who just provided a very vague, or we're going to assume very vague guideline. Just because, and we're going to assume that just because, you know, Toei and Toyotaro each have to flesh out the details on their own. But even beyond that, Toriyama himself is unlike any writer that we've seen. If I were to compare Toriyama to Oda from One Piece, what Oda from One Piece is a lot more, obviously, and this isn't an attack on Toriyama's character, because I actually like this about Toriyama's character. He's kind of lazy. That gives him charm as a writer, and I think it creates interesting writing because of his laziness, right? Or because of his need to find shortcuts. I think that makes his writing interesting, right? And Oda isn't like that. Oda has everything pre-planned out. He has books upon books upon books explaining shit down to the smallest detail, right? He knows how he wants to write his story. He has a clear path, and he's very deliberate in his writing also, right? He works very hard and all this stuff. Toriyama's kind of the opposite. He kind of obviously with Dragon Ball, he writes like more out on the fly. Or at least he was doing that during the manga's original run. Maybe he's not doing that now with the fucking Super, but in One Piece you don't really have a whole lot of plot holes or retcons or any of that sort of stuff, right? In Super, we obviously have that with the fucking Potara 1 hour time limit. What else is there? Fucking Goku using the Genki Dama on Jiren, even though Jiren's supposed to be a good guy. And actually, and like I said before, I actually don't think that's going to happen in the manga. So you have like a lot of stuff like that happening. Point is that Toriyama himself is a very fickle person, and he's very forgetful, right? And obviously there's the famous case of him forgetting Tao Pai Pai when he spoke to Oda, right? And he also thought that Super Saiyan 3 was Super Saiyan 2 at one point, and he admitted that in an interview. And he's always, you know, him forgetting stuff has been, you can just go on a Convention and read their interviews. So, like, it's obvious to everyone, and he's admitted it himself. Like, he just forgets stuff. So if he forgets because he forgets his own series, because of numerous plot holes, retcons, and inconsistencies, right? You take that sort of writing style, you take that sort of like personality, the sort of like, he's admitted that he doesn't really like anime and manga, right? He doesn't really like manga. You take that sort of personality, those characteristics, and you combine it with what I was saying earlier, him just providing a vague outline and fucking Toei and Toyotaro having to like flesh it out themselves. That just makes the issue of Super's canonicity much more grayer, right? And that relates to how seriously we take Super, right? We don't, it's like I said before, like Super to me, I don't consider Super canon because of that. Because of that combination, and obviously other reasons that I haven't stated yet, but that combination of things, if the writer isn't really trustworthy to me, right? He says things in interviews, and even in recent stuff, right? He said after Battle of Gods that Goku doesn't need to transform into Super Saiyan God, right? Yet, and he doesn't transform into, he's not going to transform into Super Saiyan 2 or Super Saiyan 3, right? Yet he does those very same things in both the manga and the anime. So what he says, right? Remember he said that after Battle of Gods, he doesn't need to transform into Super Saiyan God. He's made its powers his own. Remember he said that he probably won't transform into Super Saiyan 2 or 3 again, yet that happens already. That's already happened in both the manga and the anime. He's transformed again even after gaining God powers. He did it against Trunks. Remember that? He turned into 3. Remember against Caulifla, he fights as a Super Saiyan 2, at least in the anime. So you have like his comments, which leads into authorial intent, and why we don't take what he says, at least about Super, that seriously. Modern Toriyama, like I said, you don't really pay attention to what he says, because he says one thing, yet opposite things happen in the series. So we don't really, you don't really give what he, even though he's the original creator, it's a very interesting situation. He's the original creator, and under normal circumstances, we would say like, okay, he's the original creator, whatever he says goes, right? But that's not the case, because what he says has obviously been contradicted by what we see in the manga and the anime, and because of his personality, right? And so when I take that into account, yeah, I don't have to take super. One doesn't have to consider super non-canon. Canonicity is not at least in this case, it's not so much of it's not a fact. Canonicity is more about opinions. So anyway, yeah, and like I was speaking about authorial intent, right? Authorial intent doesn't fucking matter. I think Uber Hikari had like a really, I remember someone was talking to me about it in a stream that I was doing, and someone referenced me. Unfortunately, I don't remember the video, but if you guys look it up on your own, you can Google it, authorial intent and why it doesn't matter. And, and that will pretty much give you the guidelines of why, when an author says something, why that shouldn't matter. And I can give you another example. I think it was Angry Joe's. It was Angry Joe Show. If you guys don't know who Angry Joe Show is, Angry Joe Show is like a very famous like video game reviewer, right? You watch his review for Destiny, which came out 3 years ago, and he was talking about how, and I left a comment on that video too. He was talking about like how external lore, right? So it's basically like you have the lore that you put in the game, right? And then you have external stuff that helps to enrich it, right? And he was saying that, listen, and this is basically what he's saying, right? If the lore in the game is trash, right, and you need to leave the game to understand what was going on in the game, right, then that lore aspect of your game has failed, right? External lore should enrich the material. That's what he said, and that is absolutely true. So if you go outside of the story and you're trying to, and you have to understand what is going on, like you have to leave, if you can't understand it on your, and it's not so much like going and saying, like asking someone, right? It's not so much like going on a forum and asking someone like, oh, what happened here? It's more about like there are no clues given by the author, right? Or maybe there is a clue and maybe no one can just like recognize it, right? And yeah, there's a clue to like some sort of like plot revelation and no one can recognize it, right? And they're not able to understand it, then yeah, they have failed, because it's the onus of the author, right, to make the audience understand like what he is writing. And that in itself is not objective, that's subjective, because not every person who is reading or watching or playing whatever, right, who's going through the lore, has the same level of understanding as one another. Some people are smarter, some people are, and this isn't to be mean, dumber, but some people have less understanding, some people have more understanding, some people don't know something, people know something. Degrees of knowledge are like very varied, very varied among an audience of a franchise, right? For instance, not many people knew that, not many people still know to this day that Toriyama in an interview said that in the original manga it said that Boo was created by Bibbidi, but the truth is like he was actually there since time immemorial, right? That's something we would just be like, oh, we don't have to take that as fact, right? That's just something, and it's for the reasons that I said earlier. You have a very untrustworthy, and again, that's not an attack on his character, because like I said, he's interesting because of that. We have a very untrustworthy writer, and that fact was never talked about at all in the original product. But that being said, you have things like that, and people should just go and look up authorial intent on their own and just try to understand it. The other thing I want to talk about with canonicity is like how popularity can help to enrich it and surpass it. So, and I was, like I said before, I was going to talk about Bardock over here. Bardock, right? If you guys don't know, Bardock was in the original manga. He was in there for a panel when Goku first fought Frieza, or when he was first about to fight Frieza. It was when Frieza recognized him as his son. And what many people don't know is that Toriyama, or maybe you do know, I don't know how many people do or don't know this, but many people, I know some people don't know that Toriyama didn't create Bardock. Bardock was not a Toriyama creation. Bardock was created by Toei in a TV special, right? That Toei were the creators of Bardock, and Toriyama, after watching that TV special, was so impressed with it that he decided to include him in the original manga. And so by including him in the original manga, we say that that character is canon now, and his story is canon, because obviously that's where Bardock came from. You know, Bardock came from that. That's the origin of Bardock. The origin of Bardock is that TV special back in the 90s that was created by Toei. Then in 2013 we have that whole Dragon Ball minus bullshit. And that's also another case of like what's canon and what isn't in Dragon Ball, because in one hand, Bardock isn't Toriyama's character, yet he included them in the original manga. On the other hand, it's Dragon Ball and it's Toriyama's, but it's not the original product. So that's another case. It's kind of like Super, where you can take either one. Well, actually, no. It's unlike Super in that one of them has to be canon, right? It's not like you can say you can't say neither the TV special nor Dragon Ball minus are canon, right? You have to choose one or the other because Bardock was in the original manga. Actually, that might be a little hypocritical to what I'm saying, but but the point is, like, Bardock was in the original manga, so you have to choose a story. Which one of his stories is canon? And I think because, and this is a very muddled video, but because Bardock was in the original manga, you have to choose like which origin story of his is canon. And just because Toriyama wrote one doesn't mean that Dragon Ball Minus is more canon over the 90s special. Because the 90s special, Bardock as in itself was created by Toei. They have a license to Dragon Ball as well. So, and he was included in the original manga back in the 90s when when he was drawing Bardock in a panel when he was writing the Namek arc and drawing it. When he was drawing Bardock's face in that panel, what he was thinking about was the TV special. That was what was in his head. Dragon Ball Minus would not be created for like what, another 20 years. So that's another. So the point of like why I'm bringing Bardock in relation to Super is that you have a whole lot of evidence. Not really. I don't want to say evidence, because you have a whole lot of information and content that really muddles the situation of like what is canon and what isn't, and specifically to Bardock, but with all the stuff that I've said earlier, that also applies to Super as well. If you want my opinion, so far, like, the main point of the whole video is that you can choose whether to believe Super is canon or not. If someone says that Super is canon like it's a fact, they're wrong. If someone says Super isn't canon like it's a fact, they're wrong. If someone says Dragon Ball Minus is more canon than the TV special, or that the TV special is more canon than Dragon Ball Minus, they are wrong. To me, the point of this video is to say like it's a pick and choose situation. It's up to you to believe with like what it is, because the genesis of these things are so contradictory, and the creator of the whole damn franchise to begin with is also a very fickle person. So those elements put together create a very murky issue when it comes to canonicity. There's also some other things I want to talk about before I end it, though. Super has different writers also. Super is a show that has a lot of contradictory things because it has different writers. So in one example is like during the Versus Universe 6 arc, and this is exclusive to the anime only basically, but during the Versus Universe 6 arc, when they go to recruit Gohan to fight against Universe 6, Goku mentions Oob, right? Goku mentions Oob, and he says like, oh, I don't know, but I don't remember the exact line of dialogue, but he mentions Oob. Then when you get to the Universe Survival arc, when he's first trying to find Android 17, right? When he's first trying to find 17, he's talking with Dende, and then he tells him about Oob, and then he's all of a sudden like mind blown, like, what? There's a person named Oob? And so there we have more contradictory information clashing because of that, and obviously that happened because there were different writers. I actually haven't checked. I actually have not checked if I actually haven't checked if the writers of those 2 episodes were the same or not. I'll probably have to do that and probably write it in a comment after once the video is uploaded. But the fact that Super has different writers that's another problem, because there's a lot of contradictory information like that oob tidbit, and they're all writing their own versions of a character. It's unlike Digimon, say something like Digimon Tri, because Digimon Tri, even though that has different writers, they're all working with one another, right? In Super, we already know that they're working alone. Like, if you guys follow Toshio on Twitter, Toshio Yoshitaka, there was a tweet where he said that he pretty much works alone. Like, the writers don't really meet up with one another and bounce ideas off of each other, right? In a game like, say, like Arkham Knight, right? Batman Arkham Knight, Martin Lancaster, I think, was the writer, and he was the writer with the game director, Sefton Hill, and together they wrote that story. In the case of Super, you don't have that. You just have a writer writing an episode per week. So that's why, like, Atsuhiro Tomioka isn't working. They're not working on every episode together. They're just working on one episode here, and they just have, what they have to do is, they'll have to like pretty much like watch like a previous episode and all that to understand like the previous events, obviously. But that's why especially in this arc, Universe Survival, it's like so Monster of the Weekish, because there's just different enemies, and like you'll have Trio of Dangers one day, and then you'll have like a Sniper the other, and they pretty much have nothing to do with one another, you know. So that's one thing. On the other hand, you can also have a continuous writer like King Ryu in the Universe 6 arc, or Atsuhiro Tomioka in the Zamasu arc. And so that helps to create some sort of not only continuity but consistency also. And when I say consistency, I'm not saying with the original manga, obviously. I'm saying consistency with like one episode to another, right? Even though it's all bullshit, it's all shitty writing. But the point is, like, there's varying levels of consistency to the writing, and it's not, and yes, plot holes, inconsistencies, retcons are a part of it. When I talk about that, I mean more like there's what's the word? I can't really think of good verbiage, but it's more like they're not self-contained stories, but because they don't work together, right? Because they don't usually work together, I should say. The story is very like, oh, this is about one thing and this is about the other, and there's disconnect between that. And so because there's disconnect between that, yes, that it seems that I'm talking about problems with the writing, and that is a part of it, but because there is a disconnect, you can also say that it's not canon. You can make the argument that it's not canon because there's just so many different writers working on it. It's not, we say that the One Piece manga is canon, right? Because you have Oda working on it. We say that the Billy Bat manga is canon because you have Urasawa working with Takahashi on it. And that's not to say like you can have I'm not saying like just because a product has multiple writers and it's the first product in like that franchise or whatever, that means like it isn't canon. What I'm saying is because there's disconnect if you write like episodes. I'm not just saying like animated episodes. It can be like missions in a game or whatever. As long as there's no adaptations of it, right? You can say that it's non-canon. And that's basically what canonicity is about, because canonicity at its core, yes, popularity is a part of it, and actually I haven't explained the popularity part, and I'm going to get to that with specifically in relations to Bardock, but it's also about adaptations. We say that we say especially with shonen, we say that a manga is more canon than the shonen adaptation because the manga is like that's the true original story. That's what the creator created first. That's the true story, and that was something that was an adaptation of that. That's what canonicity ultimately falls down to, and Super doesn't have that. To talk about popularity with relation to Bardock, I was also we're going back to the TV special Bardock Dragon Ball Minus thing again. So Dragon Ball Minus is obviously written by Toriyama, right? And the thing is, like, we look at Bardock as a character, right? Bardock's appearance in Dragon Ball Minus was very much different than how he was in the manga. In the manga, he had like a headband and all that, right? Whereas in the manga, he didn't have that. He was differently designed, right? He had shoulder pads, and obviously in the anime, his first true. I don't want to say true. I shouldn't say true. Obviously, I consider the TV special to be more canon, right? Or I take that as more canon. I take that as canon over the Dragon Ball Minus chapter. But the point is, like, he's obviously very differently designed, right? So when we talk about Bardock, even though he's created by, or even though that Dragon Ball Minus incarnation was created by Toriyama, him, his character, the fucking shoulder pads and all that, what is more popular whenever we think of Bardock, we don't think of that. We don't think of Bardock in that chapter. We think of Bardock in the TV special, in the 90s TV special, when the Kanasan hit him, he has the scouter and everything, and obviously the most trademark, design-wise, the most trademark trait of his design-wise is the blood-soaked headband that he gets from Toma. And that design is what is used in promotional merchandise for the franchise. That's what probably every fan first thinks about when they think about. I'm willing to bet like 100% of people think about Bardock. They will first think of like that image of him in the TV special rather than Dragon Ball Minus. That's what's used in the video games. That's what's used in, pretty much like toy figures, like I said, promo merch. And so, because that is like the promoted image that it was, and not only the promoted image, it was the first image of Bardock as a character, we say like that is the canon, right? That is, we take that as like a canon version of Bardock, because obviously like that design was what was included in the manga also. But you see how popularity of something that wasn't created by the creator can overtake something that was created by the character, but created by the creator. Excuse me, confusing character and creator here. And that we bring that back to George Lucas and Star Wars, because that happens in Star Wars too. Look at what's his name? I can't even think of his name right now. Jesus. The fuck is his name? I completely lost my train of thought. It was fuck. What was it? Okay. The point is, right? I can't even like formulate my thoughts correctly. The point is like Star Wars, right? The point is like Star Wars. It's become popular, and it's novels. These were novels that were not written by George Lucas, right? George Lucas only did like the 6 films, right? The prequel and the sequel, or episodes 4 through 6 and 1 through 3, right? Obviously that was it. But in some cases, we've included novels, right? Star Wars novels that have to do with Darth Nihilus and Darth, what the fuck is it? Revan, I think his name is. That's part of the Knights of the Old Republic. That was in the video game. I think he's included in the novels too. That has been part of the Star Wars lore, and that's what we consider, or that's what Star Wars fans consider canon. Now, personally, I'm not a Star Wars fan, right? I'm just saying, like, I did my own research on this. So, right, and and what this has to do with like Toriyama creating Toriyama's version of Bardock is that George Lucas himself created versions of these characters. There were versions of these characters that George Lucas created. Maybe they weren't included in the movie or whatever, or maybe they were there like in some like random scene or whatever, right? But other writers that were working on Star Wars took that, expanded on the character by themselves, with or without George Lucas's, with or without talking to George Lucas, and that has been accepted as canon in that Star Wars universe. And now I remember the character. It was Kit Fisto. Kit Fisto's character is it's not explored at all, pretty much, in the movies. However, his character is expanded upon in the cartoons, in the Clone Wars and the CGI one, I forget. And it's also expanded upon in the novels, right? His name is Kit Fisto. He's like this guy with like tentacles. He has like these like not fish eyes, sorry. It's like insect eyes, I guess. So, I don't know. Very cool looking guy in my opinion, but That's an example of what I'm talking about. Kit Fisto, that whole backstory of his and like him fighting, I think General Grievous like in the Mist Planet, that has become the stuff of legend, and that was something that George Lucas didn't create. So and that's how popularity of something can surpass what the original author created and how that becomes canon. I'll give you another example, Hideo Kojima and Metal Gear. Hideo Kojima, and this is an example of like where it's not true. Portable Ops, for example. Portable Ops was a game that it wasn't written by Kojima, if I'm not mistaken, but we don't consider it as canon, or Metal Gear fans don't consider it as canon. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's Peace Walker, right? And obviously 5, and actually no, I can talk about 5, but Portable Ops wasn't written or directed by Hideo Kojima. But the reason is, even though that wasn't the case, Hideo Kojima still had a strong hand in Star Wars universe. Metal Gear has had its fair share of like novels and comics and here and there, right? But nothing has ever, very little has attempted to go outside of what Kojima himself has told. I can give you an example. There's like audio diaries of Snake and Kaz, right? If you guys have played Peace Walker or Metal Gear Solid 1 or 5, you guys know who those characters are. And obviously 3 as well. I mean, basically every Metal Gear references Big Boss, but I'm saying with like in relation to Kaz, those audiobooks, from what and don't quote me on this, right? If I'm not mistaken, Kojima had nothing to do with that. But those came out, and it explored the relationship between Big Boss and Kaz a little more. Yet no one ever references it. The reason is because Kojima, unlike Toriyama and George Lucas, where those franchises are like so big with like so much merchandise and everything, right? The Metal Gear universe is a lot more self-contained. It's just basically games with a couple comics here or a couple audiobooks here. So, and even though Portable Ops is a game, when Kojima himself talks about the Metal Gear verse or the Metal Gear saga, he always goes out of his way to exclude Portable Ops. So because of that, because he was so strongly ingrained in the Metal Gear universe, not only because of its creators, but because he oversaw like a lot of the production of Metal Gear, not just games, but content in general, like even the movie that Jordan Voight Roberts wants to make, the guy who made us Kong Skull Island. He's working closely with him on that, so that might be seen as canon. Though that would that's obviously just going to be an adaptation of the game, obviously. But that's an example of something that was overseen by a director that can or cannot be seen as canon, because ultimately, you can consider canon at the end of the day because it's a game under the Metal Gear name, and Metal Gear doesn't really they've never done spin-offs until just now with Survive. With Survive, no one considers it canon because Kojima has left Konami, and the Metal Gear license is just under Konami's name, and there's this whole thing about like fucking warpoles and zombie bullshit, but anyway, that's another talk for another video. Then we have Metal Gear Solid 5, where the tension between Konami and Kojima is believed to have compromised the quality of the story, and so fans of Metal Gear say, choose to exclude that from the canon or from the pantheon of true Metal Gear story content. Anyway, this video has been going on way too long, but I just wanted to basically what I was saying was like this is kind of just like debating like Super's canonicity to begin with, and I was just pointing out like different examples. But ultimately, at the end of the day, canonicity comes down to, with respect to anything, really comes down to like how it's adapted and the differences that adaptation has with the original source. But obviously with Super, it's a whole different beast because there is no original product for Super. There's two, and those have differences that clash with one another. And the head of that franchise to begin with is a very fickle person whose word isn't always the most reliable. And then you have other external factors, like I was explaining earlier, like popularity. And you also have what was the other thing I said? So popularity. So you have other external factors like popularity and the fact that you have like different writers working on the series to begin with. And then I also compared that with other series like Lupin the Third, Star Wars, and Metal Gear. That's pretty much as best as I can summarize the video as I can. But anyway, yeah, thank you guys. I don't know. This is something I felt like I had to make. It's kind of like people were saying like, oh, Super is canon, Super isn't canon. This is basically a video to show, in my opinion, I think it's personally my opinion is that it's a very valid video to show that you don't have to consider super canon. You can consider super canon, and I guess by extension the TV special and minus. I don't. It's not a. In my opinion, it's not a set in stone fact. And I hope this video helps to promote that idea. If you guys want my views, I don't see Super as canon. I mean, it's not really good to begin with, but you know, obviously, quality of writing and canonicity don't really have much of a connection. But I don't see Super as canon because of the things that I said in the video, and between the minus special. Or the minus chapter in the TV special, I choose the TV special as my canon version of Bardock's story. So yeah, those are my views with respect to the whole canonicity debate on Dragon Ball. Thank you guys for watching, though. Leave a comment, subscribe, or unlike, whatever. I will catch you guys later. I only took one gulp of water, wow, for 45 minutes. Not bad. Anyway, take care, guys. Bye-bye.